Hello and welcome to Casual Dad Gaming. For this video, we're going to go over how to undervolt, overclock, and make tuning adjustments to your AMD graphics card, and if that's the right decision for you. So let's dive into it. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to open up your AMD software. And just to make sure you're all up to date, head on over to AMD's website, go to Resources and Support. Under Graphics and Chipsets, you're going to go to Drivers, and make sure you have all the updated software for your AMD product. Then you're going to open up your AMD software performance. Now from here, you're going to go at the home screen, you're going to go all the way over to the performance tab. And this right here will show you what your PC is doing right now, what your GPU is doing. Here it's got your processor, your GPU utilization, and your temperature. But we want to make some changes, right? We want to talk about overclocking, undervolting, and performance tuning. So we're going to go right over here to the Tunings tab. Now this is kind of the base menu for where you're going to measure and make all of your adjustments. Right here, Global Tuning. This means that any changes that you make to the settings of your graphics card is going to apply all the time. If you want it to only apply to a certain game or application, or you want to do different levels of performance depending on what you're doing, you can of course do that. And here I've got Jagged Alliance 3 queued up because I was just playing that. But you can assign different profiles to different applications. Here you can see I've got my 6700 XT as my chosen graphics card. All right, so let's just quickly identify what all of this stuff actually means. So GPU clock speed, that is how many megahertz the GPU is actually operating at, and it's got a range or a band that it can operate in. Here's the speed of your video RAM or your video memory. Voltage is how many volts the graphics card is actually pulling in to power it. Wattage, again, is another measure of energy that is the GPU is consuming at this point in time. It's obviously very low. It's only 29 watts. Fan speed is the fans on the GPU, and of course the temperature. Resizable bar is already enabled, and that's good. We want to keep that enabled, but we want to make some changes. So here are some kind of default changes you can do. You can just click Undervolt GPU, and it'll do that for you. Overclock the GPU, overclock your VRAM. You can click all of those, and it has a preset. These are some fan presets right here, quiet and balanced. We want to make all of the custom tweaks ourselves, so we're going to go over to Manual Tuning Custom and click that. And now this breaks it down into each of the different categories that we can make tuning adjustments to. So we're going to start here with GPU tuning. All right, so we're going to enable GPU tuning right here, and then we're going to go to Advanced Control and enable that. What this does is this allows us to custom tune our minimum and maximum frequency that we want it to operate within, and also the amount of volts that it's going to bring in. So frequency, this is going to be what's considered your overclock. So 2634, this is the default maximum frequency that the graphics card can operate at. You can manually change it all the way up to, if I can get the mouse to work here, 2800 megahertz. So that's called a GPU overclock. Now that's going to require more wattage for it to operate at that enhanced level, but it is going to give you better performance. Voltage, on the other hand, this is the amount of volts that the GPU is going to be pulling in order to meet the performance requirements that you've set for it. The downside to voltage is that voltage also equals heat. So the more volts that are coming into the GPU, the hotter it's going to get. This obviously can become a problem because as the GPU heats up, it is programmed to thermal throttle, or if it gets too hot, to drastically reduce its performance on its own to avoid damaging itself. So I have found a pretty nice little sweet spot for me where I will set it to 1.1 volts or 1100 millivolts there. So that's going to be considered an undervolt. I am capping the amount of volts that it will take in to 1.1 volts. I'm not going to allow it to go over 1.1 volts. And for frequency, I like to set it at 2550. Now that's going to be below what the default setting is. I find that there's a point of diminishing returns as you add more stress to the GPU with extra capability. you don't get a whole lot of performance. And when we're done with all of these settings, I'm going to go ahead and show you some clips of a benchmark test with different uh, settings in for frequency, voltage, and all of these so that you can see the impact it's actually going to make. So minimum frequency, I don't care. 500 is fine. It doesn't matter to me. So once I've set my frequency and my voltage, I'm going to hit apply changes. Now, every graphics card is going to be a little bit different. So what you're going to want to do is come in here and make some adjustments, okay, to your voltage, your frequency, whatever you want to do, and figure out what works for you. Generally speaking, with graphics cards, more voltage is more stability. So the graphics card wants to bring in more power to keep it more stable. So it's not going to crash and have other problems. However, that's usually more than it needs. I found with this particular graphics card, if I go below 1.1 volts, if I go down to 1.075, I have some stability issues. So for me, 1.1 volts or 1100 millivolts is the sweet spot. All right, now we're going to go down to our VRAM tuning. So we're going to hit enabled here, and we're only going to have a couple of options. We'll do advanced control, and we're going to adjust our timing to fast timing, and I'm going to overclock my VRAM to 2150. Make sure I hit apply changes when I'm done. Really simple on the VRAM. We can come on over here to fan tuning. So there's a couple of settings that you can adjust here. 0 RPMs, basically what this does is this allows the fans to turn off, and I'll show you what that looks like on the fan chart. The default setting for fans is just straight 40, I think it's 42% all the way across, no matter what it's doing. I'm going to turn on 0 RPM, which what that does is allows the fans to run, or not run rather, if the graphics card is not that hot. And that's going to draw less power and also save you some noise. We can go into fine tuning controls here, and we can even adjust the fan curve based on 0 RPM turned itself off. Adjust the fan curve based on what we want it to do. I'm going to leave it for right now because that doesn't really matter to me. All right, so now this card is all tuned the way that I want it. I've applied all my changes. Now let me go ahead and show you exactly what some of the differences are at the default setting, at an undervolted underclocked, which is what it is right now, and then an undervolted and overclocked graphics card. So what I did was I tested 3 different tuning profiles in TimeSpy Benchmark and in the Starfield game, which I'm going to show you what the results of all of those were. But what TimeSpy is just a benchmarking program that allows you to put a quantifiable number on the performance of your GPU. For my first run through the benchmarking software, I ran it at the default graphics card settings. You can see that my base score was 12,571. And we'll go down here and look at the FPS. I got 83 FPS on the first test and 71 FPS on the second. In the background, you can see I was running hardware monitor to monitor what my graphics card was actually doing. And you can see the clock speeds of both the memory and the GPU, as well as the total wattage, 187. And take a look at those temperatures. Hotspot temperature of 89 degrees, and the GPU was at almost 70 degrees during that test. For my second benchmark, I went ahead and undervolted the card to 1.1 volts, and then I overclocked the frequency setting all the way up to 2800 megahertz. So let's take a look at what the results were. Our graphics score was 12,550, so almost identical. And our frames per second were a little bit higher on the graphics test 1 at 84, almost 85, and graphics test 2 was actually lower at 69.7. So this I found fairly interesting was the results from the hardware monitor during this test. You can see almost 100% utilization. The speeds were higher on the graphics card and the memory card. The power draw is going to be about the same. You can see max power draw of about 186 watts, but my temperatures were cooler, and that's from the undervolt. You can see the GPU is almost 10 degrees cooler, and the hotspot temp was about 8 degrees cooler. And for the final time spy result that I'm going to show you is an undervolt at 1.1 volts and an underclock at 2550. You can see the graphic score is 12535, and let's take a look at the frames per second. Here you've got 82.7 on the first test and 71 on the second test. So pretty much the same performance, pretty much the same score, but undervolting and underclocked. So let's just take a second and summarize our data through the time spy test and the 3 different settings that we ran at. So as you can see, undervolting the card made a dramatic impact on the GPU temperature. We knocked off over 10 degrees by undervolting the GPU during the test. And you kind of have a choice. To me, the undervolting seems like a no-brainer. And your choice comes down to overclocking or underclocking. If you overclock, you're going to be able to maintain the same performance as the default setting, but you're going to be able to keep the GPU roughly 10 degrees cooler and run about the same power draw in wattage. If you undervolt and underclock, you're going to be able to knock the temperature down even a couple of more degrees, knock off about 20% of your wattage as far as your power draw down to 158, and maintain pretty similar performance. So that's really where your choice is, in my opinion, is undervolting is a given. Are you going to overclock or underclock the GPU? So this video got a little bit out of hand with the lengthwise. So I know I had mentioned earlier about showing some Starfield data. I'm going to pause on that for now and put this video to bed. I appreciate anybody who's made it this far. If you do have any interest in seeing these different settings and how it affects Starfield performance, go ahead and let me know. To my casual dads out there who are sick and tired of hearing preteens screeching during Fortnite games, and everybody else, thanks for watching.